Rolex really isn't like any other watch brand. In fact, the privately held, independently run entity isn't like most other companies. I can say this now with a lot more clarity than most people because I was there. Rolex rarely allows anyone into its hallowed halls, but I was invited to visit their 4 manufacture locations in Switzerland and experience firsthand how Rolex makes their famous watches. Rolex is a universe of its own, respected, admired, valued, and known across the globe. Sometimes I sit back and think about all that Rolex is and does and find it hard to believe that at the end of the day, they just make watches. Rolex does just make watches, and their timepieces have taken on a role beyond that of mere timekeeper. Having said that, the reason a Rolex is because they are good watches and tell pretty good time. It's taken me over a decade to fully appreciate the brand, and it will probably take longer before I learn everything I'd like to know about them. The purpose of this article isn't to give you a totally inside look at Rolex. That isn't possible because as of now there is a strict no photography policy at Rolex. There is a very real mystique behind the manufacturer because they are relatively closed and their operations aren't public. The brand takes the concept of Swiss discreetness to a new level, and in a lot of ways that is good for them. So since we can't show you what we saw, I'd like to share with you some interesting facts that every Rolex and watch lover should know. 1. Rolex uses an expensive and difficult to machine steel because it looks better. Many watch lovers are familiar with the fact that Rolex uses a type of steel that no one else uses. Stainless steel is not all the same. Steel comes in various types and grades, and most steel watches are made from a type of stainless steel called 316L. Today, all the steel in Rolex watches is made from 904L steel, and as far as we know, pretty much no one else does. 2. Rolex has its own science lab. Given everything Rolex has done over the years, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they have an internal research and development department. However, Rolex takes it well beyond that. Rolex has not one, but several different types of extremely well-equipped professional science labs at their various facilities. The purpose of these labs isn't just to research new watches and things that may go into watches, but also to research more effective and efficient manufacturing techniques. One way of looking at Rolex is that they are an extremely competent and almost obsessively organized manufacturing company that just happens to make timepieces. 3. Rolex movements are all hand-assembled and tested. One of the biggest misconceptions about Rolex is that machines build their watches. The rumor is so pervasive that even people at A Blog to Watch believed it to be mostly true. This is because traditionally Rolex didn't communicate much on this topic. Well, the truth is that Rolex watches are given all the hands-on human attention that you'd like to expect from a fine Swiss-made watch. 4. An in-house foundry makes all the gold for Rolex watches. Rolex makes their own gold. While they have a small handful of suppliers that send them steel, Rolex still works the steel in-house to make all the parts. All the gold and platinum is made in-house. 24K gold comes into Rolex and it is turned into 18K yellow, white, or Rolex's Eve Rose Gold, their non-fading version of 18K rose gold. 5. Technology is a watchmaker's best friend. The philosophy at Rolex seems to be very pragmatic. If a human does it better, then let a human do it. If a machine does it better, then let a machine do it. In fact, the reason more watchmakers don't use machines is twofold. First of all, machines are huge investments, and in many instances keeping people around to do it is less expensive. Second, they don't have the production demands that Rolex does. In fact, Rolex is fortunate to have the ability to equip its facilities with robotic help where needed. 6. Fort Knox has nothing on Rolex. It isn't surprising that Rolex is keen on security. At their foundry, for example, I was given a bar to carry around that weighed in at just over $1 million worth of Eve Rose gold. There is a lot more of that, as well as valuable completed watches that need safekeeping. Rolex employs a series of extremely meticulous security checks, and they had a James Bond-style safe that is located a few floors underground. 7. Rolex dive watches are individually tested in pressurized tanks with water. All Rolex Oyster case watches are thoroughly tested for water resistance. The way that this is often done at watch manufacturers is with an air pressure tank. A watch is placed in a small chamber that is filled with air, and if the pressure changes at all, it means that air leaked into the case. Each Rolex Oyster as well as Oyster dive watches begins with this air pressure treatment. In fact, each case is tested both before and after a movement and dial are placed inside of it.